Miami police, in dealing with that city's enormous drug trade, have developed a reputation for toughness. They've been known to break down a door or two. Now, however, as NBC's Jim Kaczorski reports tonight, the police are confronted with a dangerous new problem. They're being imitated.
This kind of break-in is routine in Miami drug raids. Narcotics officers sometimes recover millions of dollars worth of cocaine and hundreds of thousands in cash from the homes of high-living drug dealers. And now criminals posing as police are doing the same thing.
The amount of money that is involved in narcotics transactions makes a narcotics trafficker a prime target for a home invader.
The fake cops can buy authentic-looking badges and official police gear, such as equipment bags, lights, even police cars.
This is sold in the auto trader. It is an old police vehicle that was sold to a dealership along with a number of others.
With police cars and equipment so easy to obtain, fake police are passing for the real thing, long enough to get inside even the most secure home. It happens once a day in Miami, police say, and the imposters can be vicious.
When they'll come in, they'll have the mentality that if they got to shoot it out, they will.
Police raids are always dangerous, and even more so now in Miami because of the police imposters. Police are usually able to persuade suspects to surrender, but in this case, the suspect shot at officers he thought were fakes. The police say that in 90% of home invasions in Miami, the victims are involved in the narcotics trade. But the counterfeit cops, thieves disguised as police, make mistakes.
They grabbed me by the throat and stuck their gun up under my throat, threatened to kill me.
This man and his family were tied up and their home ransacked before thieves realized they had the wrong house.
There's nothing you can do. I'd try to carry a gun with me, you know, to try to protect myself. But if you do that, if they want to hurt you, there's nothing. You're at their mercy.
For now, police don't have an ideal solution to the problem of home invasion. For homeowners, they can recommend only that they call an emergency number to verify that real law officers are knocking at the door. But even the police admit officers, both real and counterfeit, may not give the homeowner time to make a phone call before they start breaking down the door. Jim Kaczorski, NBC News, Miami.
And in San Diego County today, 2 men were trying to drive cocaine across the Mexican border about 50 miles east of San Diego. And tonight, those men are in jail. And San Diego County has its biggest coke bust ever. $150 million worth of cocaine was confiscated. Border agents were alerted when an underground electronic sensor went off as the cars crossed the border on a dirt road.
We often tell you stories about drug trafficking and the growing war on drugs. Tonight we have a tragic story about the terrible personal toll of drug use in one family. As Dave Lopez reports, it is the story of a man who has to live with the fact that in trying to save his brother's life, he ended up killing him.
Reggie Traylor wants people to know that he was proud of his younger brother, Rodney, who had a brief tryout in the NFL with the San Diego Chargers. That Rodney was a decent man with a good heart, and he had ambition until cocaine entered his life.
In college sports, college athletics, just being, brought up in general, you're going to be exposed to it one way or another. And sometimes the temptation is hard.
Cocaine did change Rodney, the use of it and selling it. And the two brothers argued about it. And one day last week, Rodney, 65 pounds heavier, came after his brother Reggie in a threatening manner. Reggie shot his brother in the thigh, not to kill him, he says, but he saw no other way to stop him. The preliminary coroner's report shows that under normal circumstances, Traylor should have survived the gunshot wound. But because there was so much cocaine in his system, his blood would not coagulate, would not clot, and he bled to death. After 2 days of studying the facts of this case, a district attorney decided to drop the murder charge and instead rule this a justifiable homicide. Today, Reggie, the father of 6 young children, is trying to live with a nightmare. He wants to do something about cocaine use. Anything. He just doesn't know how.
If his life saves one person from getting involved with drugs, making someone to go farther than they would before, his life will not be in vain.
The tale of 2 brothers and cocaine use. And the end result, heartache and tragedy. Dave Lopez, Channel 2 News, Santa Ana.
Tonight, Berkeley authorities are heating up their war on drugs. In fact, the local war on drugs has been going on there now for just over a month. Channel 7's Willie Monroe was there when the city's drug task force was out there making a sweep in a favorite haven for drug dealing.
For more than a month now, the Joint University of California and Berkeley Police Drug Task Force has been serving notice on suspected dealers.
That's nothing. I found that a few minutes ago.
Like many communities, Berkeley has adopted the direct approach to the drug problem, targeting high crime areas and zeroing in on those who sell drugs and those who buy them. In this sweep, 4 people were arrested for selling LSD, the individual doses on sections of paper.
Hopefully in the long run, we're going to put the word out that, you can come to Berkeley and have a good time, but dope dealers beware.
Pockets of drug activity are scattered around the city. The area just south of the university is one of them, where drug dealing has been flagrant, brazen, and out in the open.
So in the past, probably 2.5 years, we've just seen a marked increase in the amount of drug trafficking that has occurred in and about the area of People's Park, especially People's Park.
While many people would agree that People's Park has become a notorious haven for drug dealing, many people don't like the police crackdown. They say some innocent people are caught up in the sweep.
They're just pressuring the people that's here to get them out of the park, and they're just putting false pressure just to terrorize everybody through here. And I don't use drugs, so I do agree the drugs should be busted, but not the innocent people.
We know the dealers out there, and not too often do we pick up the wrong people.
Many officers complain of the frustration of arresting the same dealers several times, often within days or weeks.
It's a police report from the last time we arrested him.
Some citizens complain that police go after the small-time dealer while letting the big fish get away. It's a fight on many fronts, not ever likely to please everybody. In Berkeley, Willie Monroe, Channel 7 News, tonight.
A federal judge in Miami today declared a mistrial in the cocaine and racketeering trial of 7 Miami police officers. Initially, the jury reached guilty verdicts against 2 of the officers on some of the counts, and they were deadlocked on the other 5. However, after a great deal of confusion, it was disclosed that the jury had not been unanimous in the guilty verdicts, and the judge then declared a mistrial.
A man police say is the boss of one of Oakland's 3 major drug rings is under arrest tonight. Milton Mickey Moore was scheduled to be arraigned in San Francisco federal court this afternoon. Oakland police say there was $50,000 worth of heroin in Moore's home when he was grabbed last night. He was booked on suspicion of having heroin for sale.
He turned out in full force today to send youngsters a message: say no to drugs. News 9's Robert Miller reports organizers say education is the key to dealing with the drug abuse problem.
The Just Say No anti-drug picnic and rally attracted an estimated 200 people. It was held in a park adjacent to the Manahan Village low-income housing project, an alleged hotbed of drug activity.
You can drive down the street and just pull your car up to the curb and you can buy whatever you want. You go into the buildings, you can buy, you open your door, it's there in front of you.
Mrs. Brown says the police are making a sincere effort, but enforcement must be supplemented with education. The problem appears to be growing.
I've seen people from all different walks of life come to this particular point to buy drugs.
The Sheriff's Department is trying to increase awareness with its reality anti-drug program, reaching out to the community, in this case with a former neighborhood resident who is doing time but who is permitted to leave jail to counsel potential drug abusers.
Well, I tell them the feelings that I experience when I think about my past lifestyle, and I think about all the time that I wasted in different reformatories, county jails, and state prisons, and how sometime I wish that I can turn back the hands of time and maybe go back and take a different path.
In the neighborhood where drugs are allegedly rampant, I asked about the effectiveness of rallies such as today's.
It will make people who don't deal and that sort of thing more aware of what's going on. I don't know if it will particularly stop the situation at all.
This is a continuing effort at education. Potential drug users will also be offered a tour of the reformatory in Annandale. And there will be another Just Say No picnic here at the end of the month. Robert Miller, News 9, Morristown.
Drugs in America. There is news about this from many fronts tonight. The government says that while the potent form of cocaine, which is known as crack, is widely available in many of the nation's big cities, in some parts of the country, the use of crack is not as widespread as first thought. In fact, according to a report from the DEA, in some big cities such as Chicago, New Orleans, and Philadelphia, crack is generally not even available. And there is another report tonight on drug use in America, drug use by doctors. The Harvard School of Public Health surveyed hundreds of doctors and medical students and found that more than half the doctors surveyed and more than 3/4 of the medical students have at some time misused drugs. In New York City today, 13 police officers were suspended after charges that they stole drugs and money from street pushers in a Brooklyn neighborhood. A grand jury now will look into those allegations. And in Boston, there is a big controversy tonight over drugs and the police and a proposal to test the officers for drug use. NBC's Lisa Myers has more on the plan and why many people don't like it.
Like most other major cities, Boston has declared war on drugs. But so far, the biggest battle in Boston's war is whether the police department should undergo drug tests.
Detail, 10, boom.
There is no evidence the police force here has a serious drug problem. Out of 1,800 officers, 7 have been dismissed for drugs in the last 2 years. But the police commissioner wants to test every police officer, every file clerk, every janitor to be sure no one is using drugs.
Police officers are to be judged at a higher standard. And the day you take that oath, you know, police officers know that they have a higher duty. Oh my God, we are the people who have to enforce the laws.
The Patrolmen's Association calls random testing an invasion of privacy and has gone to court to block it.
Nothing in my oath of office ever says that I should give up my constitutional rights, and I'll fight for them as long as I have to.
Other police departments interested in conducting drug tests are watching the Boston case, and the Reagan administration has a stake in it, warning that if the Boston plan is declared unconstitutional, it could jeopardize the president's plan to test federal workers. Boston would test police employees for 4 drugs: marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and PCP. As many as 3 different tests would be run on each urine specimen to ensure findings are reliable. The tests would be conducted at random with names selected by computer. The Justice Department argued in court documents that such tests are no different from fingerprints or background checks.
As long as drug testing is done as a condition of employment, of determining that someone is fit for their job, and not as part of a criminal prosecution, there's not a constitutional problem.
The Policemen's Union has no problem with testing if there's a reason to suspect someone's using drugs.
But you may not just round me up without cause and tell me to urinate in a bottle, and if I don't, you're going to fire me.
The case will be argued in federal court later this fall, but most believe that the Supreme Court ultimately will have to decide whether the war on drugs merits, as one judge put it, invading the privacy of the innocent to discover the guilty. Lisa Myers, NBC News, Boston.
And for college athletes, there's a tough new drug testing plan unveiled today by the NCAA, which oversees college sports. Starting with this season's college football bowl games and the basketball championship next spring, all competing athletes will be tested for drug use. Those who test positive will be barred from playing. And in championship games, if a player on the winning team has been using drugs, that team then forfeits the game.
Use for the last 4 or 5 years, it's only been identified as a disease since 1981. But now we learn that it may have been in this country as early as 1969 at least. What does that tell us? Here's our medical correspondent, George Strait.
The mystery surrounding the boy named Robert Rayford begins on this porch in St. Louis, where we found his mother and brother. It's been almost 20 years, but they still mourn Robert's death.
He was too young, you know, but 16 years old. Doctor operated on him. Seemed like he just got worse. Started bending over like he was an old man.
His doctor back then says Robert had a number of infections, including a genital one with the bacteria chlamydia.
It seemed every tissue that we tested yielded chlamydia. His blood, his lymph.
Lymphedema, or generalized body swelling, is the cause of death listed on Robert's death certificate. But his autopsy revealed something else, a rare cancer.
And it wasn't until the autopsy, which his family kindly signed for, that we discovered that he had Kaposi's sarcoma.
Doctors had no answers in 1969, but 18 years later they think they do. Robert seems to be a classic case of AIDS, the earliest known case of AIDS in this country. But it's an answer that's raised new questions.
AIDS evidently was present far earlier in the population than we imagined.
But the AIDS diagnosis would have just been a theory if not for one of Robert's doctors who actually saved samples of his blood and tissue.
It was such an interesting case, I just simply didn't want to say goodbye to it.
18 years later in this old storeroom, she found many of the old samples and sent them to this lab in Louisiana, where they confirmed it. Robert Rayford had AIDS 12 years before it was recognized in this country in 1981. Shocking news for his family, who said Robert was a quiet, loving boy, and who denied reports that Robert was a homosexual.
He was a dude, everybody loved him.
Doctors have no idea how Robert got AIDS, but since the AIDS virus lies dormant for a number of years, experts say they are not surprised to find AIDS victims like Robert before 1981. Dr. Robert Gallo says the AIDS virus has been around for centuries, becoming a public health menace when lifestyles changed.
The intravenous drug addiction, contaminated needles, the use of blood and blood products in this century, the widespread travel of people in the last few decades, all made what was very rare become something much more concentrated.
In fact, there may have even been earlier cases of AIDS. In 1959, a sailor in Britain died of pneumocystis pneumonia. In 1961, a nurse in Chicago died of Kaposi sarcoma, as did a number of children in New York in 1975. But these cases can't be proven because, unlike Robert, no tissue samples were ever saved. Most of Robert's neighborhood is gone. What's left are troubling questions. If he had AIDS in the 1960s, how many other Americans had it? And how many did they infect? Robert's case points to a central dilemma in the AIDS epidemic. The more that's learned, the more that scientists realize just how much they really don't know. George Strait, ABC News, St. Louis.